as you can see in the last video, we removed the Stormtrooper body from the frame and got the Bronco to be named later set to the side. Bronco to be named later, for those of you who don't know, is the 74 Bronco that is hiding over there in the corner. So this is the Stormtrooper 73 Bronco. We purchased this in February from Matt's Garage, and we are bound and determined to get this thing finished. The hump, as far as I'm concerned, is getting this thing in paint before winter sets in here in Colorado, which gives us a very short window. So we now have it on our homemade body cart. Now we're going to blow this thing apart. We're going to get all the panels off. We're going to start our process for cleaning these panels and getting them ready for primer. Our method of cleaning this is not exactly like you might see in other paint videos. This is our first painting project on a vehicle. We are going to do it with basic equipment. We are going to not purchase anything special outside of what you have to paint a car. And then at the end of this, we're going to see how good or how bad our paint job is. I'm not worried about it. We're going to take every precaution we can, but at the same time, we're not going to overly spend money. We're not going to put ourselves in a position to where we have to buy, for instance, I want to buy a new compressor, but the compressor that I have has made it through a lot of projects that I've done and hasn't failed me yet. So I'm going to save that $1,000 for right now and put it into this vehicle and keep my old compressor. I'm going to keep my old welder. I bought new paint guns, but I got very inexpensive ones from Eastwood, and I'll also link in the description the video where I talk about, you know, the cost of the primer, body filler, epoxy primer, 2K surfacer, all that. I did a video on that a couple of videos ago. Whole thing cost me like $350, something like that. So not overly expensive, and the guns I can reuse over and over again, and there's enough urethane surfacer there to do probably 2 cars. So so I'm not really worried about that. But the point is that this is going to be a completely amateur job by a couple of people that have never done it before and could completely turn into a disaster. And we don't care, because it's not that we're made of money. In fact, we're a single income household, but it's just fun. It's just about having fun. I'm not taking this project too seriously to the point that, you know, I think I'm gonna flip it for $100,000 or it's gonna be the Bronco of the year or anything like that. I'm just having fun with it, and when we get done with it, it's gonna be something that we'll be proud of. It'll be something that we're gonna drive around. It's just designed to be a fun project. So please take all of what we're doing with a grain of salt, because we are basically just taking a bunch of different information, throwing it together, and trying to come up with a way that we can do this, make it our own, and when we get done, it'll either be great or it'll be horrible. So, so take a note on that. We are not experts at all. Now, one of the things that I did do was we have an old school method of cleaning metal. We have primed a car before. We have done body work on cars before. We have never taken it to a paint ourselves kind of situation. So we are going to prep this body work in what I consider to be an old-fashioned way of doing it. First, we're going to blow this apart. Then I'm going to go over the way that we're going to be cleaning this body and prepping it for paint. And then we are, at that point, going to start testing equipment, testing our guns. I'm going to do a test spray on a door, an old door that came with the Bronco. And then we're going to get rolling. So let's start pulling this thing apart. All right, as you can see, We got the top off, doors off, fenders off, grill off, tailgate off. There's everything right there. Now we're going to start cleaning this. We're going to scuff the black primer that came on the panels that were aftermarket, and then we're going to mask this body off into 6 sections, top and bottom, so 6 top, 6 bottom, and we're going to go through every inch, and we're going to grind down welds, add welds where we need to add them, clean, and then when we get done with these sections, it should be ready outside of the last minute tack cloth that we have to do in order to get any additional dust off of this. Behind me you can see I've got the grill and the dashboard, and the grill was particularly tough because along this side of the grill there were large dents in there, and they were filled with body filler about the size of a softball, and had to get all of the body filler out of there in order to rework the metal and get it to where a skim coat will hide any of the imperfections. Skim coat being a micro coat of body filler. And then the dashboard, then also on the grill in the front here, we had the 2 license plate holder holes, which were totally fine, with the exception of this one was about that big around. It looked like a giant gunshot. Something had happened and had caused this hole to grow significantly large and bend all the metal back up in there. I was able to move that metal back, and then to get the original hole where the license plate was going to be, and then I just filled those holes in so that, because I'm not going to put a license plate on the grill, I'm going to put it on the bumper. So I filled those in, and it's not perfect, but it's better than the giant hole that was in there right now. I still have some body work done to that. We've got some rust there. I've got some more big dents that were on this side that I had to pull out as well. The dash for the most part was in good shape. Just had to remove the 2 layers of paint that were on it and the primer and get it down to bare metal. So let me show you the tools that I used to get this body work done. So first on these body panels, we had to get the paint off. Behind me is the Bronco to be named later, which is my first Bronco. That's a 74 Bronco. It is still in preparation for primer and paint right now. We still have some body work that's done to it. But then when we got the 73 Bronco, that took precedent. We basically ground all the paint off with a polycarbide abrasive wheel. And this works amazing. The problem is that with all of the body filler and paint that were on that Bronco, it basically put an inch of red dirt all over my garage, on every single thing in the garage, including our recreational equipment, all my tools, everything that's stored in here. Even with the plastic kind of separating the area, it just enveloped the entire garage, and this has been now a year later, 2 years later, I'm still sweeping out red dirt in this garage. So when we did the Bronco, when we did the 73 Bronco, I was bound and determined not to do that. So we started with stripping the paint. It was a pain in the butt. It took several weeks, and I only had 3 or 4 body panels to do. Went through 3 different types of stripper and came down to this Jasco stripper, which I got at Home Depot. In my opinion, this worked better than the aircraft stripper, and it worked better than the strip clean stripper as well. I layered it on with a brush, put plastic over the top of it, let it sit for 15 minutes, scraped it very gently with a razor blade window scraper. You had to be very gentle. In fact, I took some sandpaper and I just kind of detuned the edges just a little bit, so that if I got too sideways on this thing, it didn't gouge the metal, and that seemed to work really well. And I probably went through, I got a box of blades at Home Depot for $3.88. I think it had 50 blades in it. I went through about 3/4 of those blades. But this got through the paint and the primer pretty good. Then I took the polycarbide stripper and I did this very lightly. So this wheel has a tendency to gouge metal if you put too much pressure on it. So we literally just touched what was left of the paint and primer on there with this to get it to where it wasn't very thick in the areas that we couldn't get it down to metal with the scraper, and then left it there. Then we went to a DA sander and with 180 grit, actually I used 150 grit paper on a hook and loop, and spent some time, went through about 2 packages of this Diablo sandpaper, also from the Home Depot, to get the hood clean to where it is now. And this will also take off any uneven spots that maybe the wheel had on there, the wheel put on the metal, or even just imperfections. It helps smooth that out. Then heat. I normally use a torch, but I was out of gas, so I used a heat gun to heat up the dents, and then hammered and dollied them out with a hammer and dolly. The biggest dents in the metal were in the grill, and they were about like a softball that hit the side of it and put a dent in it, and they just filled it full of putty. And so digging all that out was a mess. I got the dent pulled out very easily, and it's well within a skim coat of being completely flat. So I'll call that a success. So we did that there. Also, any other imperfections like on the grill, like the bullet hole in the grill, that one was pulled also out by hammer, dolly, chisel. Used the chisel a little bit to reform some of the metal in the 90-degree bends. But the key to it was to apply heat to make the metal more malleable, and then you don't have to hit as hard, therefore possibly deforming it. So if there's a lot of aircraft sounds in this, we are within a half a mile from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and they constantly do flyovers, so that's what you're hearing. This time it is vintage World War II aircraft. Now we're going to have to clean the metal, and that is going to take a little bit of work with this, because it is nicknamed the Stormtrooper because it went through 900 miles of snowstorms in February in Washington, Oregon, and Utah. And we got lots of salt in this body down in the cracks. I did my best to clean it when we got back, knowing that I was going to have to clean it again before paint. So we're going to have to clean it again. So in normal paint prep, you probably won't go through all of these steps, but this is what I'm going to do in order to make sure that this thing is completely clean, and that when we go to prime it, it will be perfect. First, the always underestimated Trisodium Phosphate. So this is super cheap. It is made to clean essentially anything from grease, grime, dirt, things like that, but primarily used in siding and house preparation for painting. In this case, it will work for metal. And from my experience, I used to buy a product called Metal Wash, and looking at it and using it, it looked a lot like Trisodium Phosphate, although on the label it didn't say that anywhere. I went and bought some Trisodium Phosphate and did the same thing with it and tested the two, and this was back on the Mustang when I was restoring the Mustang, and I couldn't tell the difference between the two, and both of them somewhat protected the metal from flash rusting when I was washing it. So I went ahead and switched to Trisodium Phosphate and finished the rest of the car, and didn't have a single problem with rust, other than you cannot let this pool. So when I'm washing the body panels in it, I'm washing them standing up. For instance, I just did the fender on the driver's side for the Bronco, and I stood it up so that when I was washing it, all the water ran down, because if Trisodium Phosphate pools and dries, it will rust instantly the spot that it pools in. But if you keep it running and you keep it wet and you keep it out of the sun, and then you dry it immediately with towels, or even in the past I have used a leaf blower to get all the, or an air compressor to get all the water out of the gaps, then it will actually protect the metal from flash rusting very well. In fact, this one was done twice, and you don't see a bit of rust or anything on that. This is a 32-ounce sprayer. I dissolve 2 teaspoons of Trisodium Phosphate in this hot water. Make sure it's hot so it dissolves. And then I spray it on using this instead of using it in a bucket and washing it with a sponge, because at that point you're reusing dirty water and grease on your spot that you're trying to clean. So that's Trisodium Phosphate and water. Then my second is Phosphoric Prep and Etch in a bottle, and I dilute this 3-to-1. And then I'll spray down this panel and I'll let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then I will wipe it off. And that's going to help not only clean it further, but also etch it a little bit more than the sandpaper that I put on there to give it a super clean, super easy bonding metal so that paint and primer can stick to it. And then I'm going to finish it off with an acetone bath in order to get any of the residue of any of this and any grease that might have been missed before. So it's going to be as clean as an operating room floor, and the epoxy primer will stick to it like that. Well, we got almost all the panels prepped last night as far as cleaning is concerned. And then late last night I got a wild hair and basically rolled the body card out into the driveway and scrubbed the entire thing down all at once. I was going to go section by section at first, but there's so much salt still in this body and dirt, road grime in this body, that once I started, I noticed that it just needed to have another good cleaning. So I took it out and I scrubbed the entire body down, top and bottom. The bottom was rusted solid because I hadn't done anything with that since I got it back. But it cleaned up super nice. It did it. The mix of the phosphoric acid and the TSP did a great job on getting that rust off. And then now I need to let it dry and go back through and do that 6x6 that I was going to do earlier to get all the tiny little bits of spot rust that are still left, and to get it wiped down with acetone, fix a couple of the welds, and then we're ready for primer. So in the next episode we will probably be hanging plastic for the priming event, and that should be in a couple of days if we can get this completed. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and we're really super close. We're going to be priming, painting, and then building this Bronco, and then we start on the next Bronco, and then at the same time we do a Wagoneer. That's a wrap from Point 3 Garage.